If you ever wondered how the CPD validation process works from ECSA, well, I'll take you through the process. It's a little bit complex and a little bit crazy at sometimes with all of the documents that need to be submitted, but I think we just go through it. ECSA does not do the validation of CPD material. They do not. That role or that function has been seconded to the voluntary associations or universities, also known as licensed bodies. The only exception to this rule is when you have gone to an overseas course and or seminar, then there's a specific form that you need to complete, and that form you submit to ECSA, and ECSA will then validate that event for you, because these service providers are not registered in South Africa to do the work. You have got ECSA. ECSA have got a database. On that database, you will find licensed bodies, service providers, and also all the CPD validated material. So that's the main function of that database, and those are the three key aspects to it. The process looks like this. You've got your licensed bodies. Now, your licensed bodies consist of your voluntary association, your universities, or any other body that applies to ECSA to become a licensed body, which means you need to complete a set of documents, you need to submit it to ECSA, and the form that you complete is the ECPD 8 form. You complete that form, all the documentation, submit it to ECSA. ECSA then goes through the documentation and make sure everything is fine. When they're happy with that, they allocate you a licensed body number. That specific form will allow you to practice as a licensed body for a period of 3 years. Most of the voluntary associations and universities and others, but mostly your voluntary associations, also do CPD training. So therefore, they also need to apply to become a service provider. So your voluntary association is also a service provider. And to become a service provider, you also have to apply to ECSA to become a service provider, to have the ability or the recognition to do training. And in this case, you have to complete ECPD 7 form. That form gets completed and sent to ECSA. ECSA makes sure, once again, that all the boxes are ticked and the documents are submitted. They then allocate you with a service provider number. That's your ECPD 7 form. So that's your top tier, that's your top level. Now let's have a look at your service providers, your training providers who wants to become service providers in this industry. They need to complete the ECPD 7 form and submit that form to the licensed bodies. Now interesting, they don't submit it to ECSA, they don't submit it to anyone else, they submit it to the licensing bodies or the VAs. And the reason for that is because those powers have been transferred onto the licensed body so that they can do all of that work. If the licensed body then feel that they're happy with everything that was submitted, the quality is done, the documentation's been submitted, there's a record of it, then they submit the ECPD 9 form back to ECSA. Now, ECPD 9 form basically says that you as a VA or licensed body have now approved the service provider, you're happy with everything, they can now capture that information or that approval onto their database. You also, as a licensed body, then submit a document, let's call it a letter, to the service provider or a certificate to the service provider to say you have been approved as a service provider to operate in the built environment, in the engineering fraternity. So therefore, here is your number, your specified or your service provider number, and you must use this on all of the material that you do training on. So that now takes care of the service provider and being recognized as one. Next step, then the service provider obviously have got their CPD material. And that CPD material that they've created need to be validated for CPD credits and to have a CPD validation number. So this process looks like this. The service provider then goes and completes the ECPD 2 form. In the ECPD 2 form is all the documentation that they need. That will be CVs of the presenters, PowerPoint slides, the handouts, every supporting document possible that they can to make the audit process easier gets submitted with the ECPD2 form. Then the license body goes and appoints a reviewer. The material gets submitted to the reviewer, and this is where your costs come in. So service providers take note that when you submit your ECPD2 form with all of your information, there will be a fee. You have to pay to get your material validated. Why? Because the reviewers do the review. It's their time and their effort and expertise that needs to be compensated for. So that's where your reviewers come in, and that's where the fee gets paid over. Some of the licensed bodies, I believe, do charge for the process to become a service provider also, but some don't. For instance, IPET, the Institute of Professional Engineering Technologists, they do not charge for that. It's a free service that they do. However, the reviewers and the cost for the validation is charged out. Now, when the reviewer comes back with the outcome, so it could either be approved, it could be approved pending changes, or it could be declined, and that information needs to be communicated as well. However, if it's successful, then an ECPD3 form gets submitted to ECSA with the outcome of the review that happened. And if it's successful, then that ECPD3 form, in the form of either a letter, certificate, or whichever means is appropriate, gets sent to the service provider with a validation number on it, and also with the credits that's been allocated to that specific course. Must also reflect on that form. Some of the VAs just use that ECPD3 form because that's formal already and the information is already, everything that you need is on there already. So that is what it looks like. Now you've got a nice little picture of it. Looks very complicated. There's lots of forms that get sent there and back and all of that. And if you've got a manual system, good luck. You're going to battle. To keep track of this, it's not that easy. ECSA will then also go and visit the licensed bodies, the VAs or whoever, and make sure that this process that I've sketched here, that all of this is happening right, that there's supporting documents, that everything is kosher and running fine, all the boxes are ticked. So that's the auditing role that ECSA plays here. So my suggestion is, and which I've done with iPad as well, is to get an automated system or an electronic system. I've created the app for them. We use that app. It's freely available for everybody to use. Gone to ECSA and showed them how it works. Everybody is happy with it, so it's available. So if you want to use it, it's there. All of these forms obviously are converted into electronic format. For the ones who like the wording, here's a slide on the wording. Let's call it 3 levels of validation that happens. The first level, which is your highest level, that is your CPD license bodies. Those are typically your VAs, your universities, those kind of organizations. They apply to ECSA to become a licensed body. ECSA approves it and allocates a number and put it onto the database. Then the service providers from a VA or a licensed body point of view, because remember, lots of the licensed bodies also do training, and therefore they need to be registered as service providers as well. They complete a ECPD7 form, goes through to ECSA, get a number, gets put onto the database. Level 2, that's your privateers. Those are the people, individuals, private companies, training houses, all of those entities. They apply to the licensed bodies like iPad or SAICI or SAIMECI or any one of them to become a service provider. They complete the ECPD7 form, submit all the documentation. On approval, ECSA gets notified. They put it onto the database. The licensed body keep a record of that as well, and that means that they can go ahead and do the training. They get confirmation of all of that. And when they've done that process and they've jumped through those loops, then they can start submitting their CPD material for validation. That's your ECPD2 form. They submit that, gets validated or reviewed, for the lack of a better word, by an assessor or by a competent person in that field. They write a report, so there needs to be evidence of that. And on success, it gets sent back to the service providers to go ahead with their training and put it onto their marketing material. That is the process. That's how it works currently with ECSA. And the important forms that you should always take cognizance of, that's your ECPD 8, 7, 9, 2, and 3 form. Personally, I do not agree to the extent of this. I strongly believe that it could be simplified much more. In the case with ECSA, which is concerning for me, or a little bit insane if you ask me, is that, say for instance, I think they've got 52 licensed bodies that they have to go and create, duplicate 52 times. SAICI needs to have a system where trading providers can register service providers and get their stuff validated for CPD. So does AMECI, so does the electrical engineers, so does IPED, so does the university. So all of them needs to go and develop exactly the same thing that does exactly the same function for every single one of these licensed bodies. I honestly believe that is insane. I believe one system could take care of the whole process in itself, and it could be available to all of the licensed bodies. I have installed the CPD system for SACNASP. It works perfectly fine. Some of the voluntary associations within the built environment are also service providers or training providers to the SACNAS environment, the environmental scientists and a few others, and chemical. And they have also stepped up to support the notion. There's a website address. You feel free to go and have a look and see how it works. If you're not sure about anything, please contact us. We'll be able to help you with your validation process. If there's specific reviewers that also want to be on board, you're more than welcome to contact us, and we can add you as reviewers onto the system. Obviously, you get paid for your time to do that, so that's also available. And that is the story with CPD validation and the processes associated with it for ECSA. Thank you. I'm Johan van Schalkwyk from Professional CPD, working in conjunction with IPED.